Hello and welcome back to the big stage, brought to you by Betting Expert. In this show, we're going to look at some of the best betting angles into the round of 16 at Euro 2020 and try and find out exactly what England need to change in order to actually go ahead and win the tournament. As ever, I'm joined by my special guests, Wayne Bridge, former England international, as well as Rory Jennings. But another guest that we have today is another former England international, Liverpool legend, and I want to say rap god as well, Mr. John Barnes. John, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
How have you... God, though.
Okay. But what have you made of Euro 2020 so far? Have you been enjoying the tournament?
It's been great. It's been fantastic. I wasn't sure about the three teams going through format because, of course, it makes a bit of a farce of the fact that, if three teams can go through from the group, it's a bit of a farce. But what it's done is it has made everybody attack, because they know if you can get 3 points, and we can see teams possibly going through on 3 points. So if it means you can win a game, then you can attack. So every game I've seen, you've not seen anybody sit back and just defend, as you've seen in past tournaments. So it really, while I don't agree with the format itself has made the tournament better in terms of everybody attacking to try and score goals.
Great stuff. Now, like I say, we are going to dig deeper into what England need to change to win. But we're going to have a quick recap of Group D to start us off with, as well as then dive deeper into England v Germany. Then looking ahead, we're also going to touch on Wales against Denmark as well, the standout players, and the rest of the round of 16 fixtures. We're also going to have Rory's rant. So our broadcaster, Rory Jennings, has got a little bit of a touchy subject he wants to get off his chest. And we're going to round off today's show with our community section, where we're going to look at the community of tipsters on Betting Expert. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about the Group D review. So obviously looking at the Group D standings, John, I want to ask, before the tournament started, would you have taken 7 points, no goals conceded, top of the group?
Absolutely. Of course, in England, we always want to play sparkling football, score loads of goals, and in every game be great. The first game against Croatia was really good. Scotland, not so good. First half, in the last game, not great, but we haven't conceded goals. And that's what you need to do. As much as you want to score, like Italy have scored lots of goals, okay, they haven't conceded. But for England, I've always feared about them conceding goals. So, yes, we want to go forward, we want to score more goals, but it's a plus that we're not conceding goals. So I would have taken this at the start.
And Wayne, over to you. First of all, thanks for being back on the show as well. Great to have you on. But what have you made of England's start so far?
I'm happy with it. Like you said, they haven't conceded any goals. Everyone thinks we're going to win it after the first game, and typical England style, we don't perform to the best of our ability, and everyone thinks we're the worst. All the fans think we're the worst team ever. I'm just happy. We haven't, like you said, we haven't conceded goals. I think a massive positive for me. I know everyone keeps talking about Grealish, but Saka playing the other day, I thought he was fearless. And I think with him and Sterling, if he was to get a chance to play on the wing again, I love the speed of both of them. And I think the further on you go in this competition, they're going to open up teams a little bit more.
And maybe taking that fan's perspective, Rory, can you explain maybe why there is so much negativity in the England fan base at the moment?
I think people were really optimistic, weren't they, when this tournament started? I think people have been referring to this generation as a golden generation and believed that we could see something truly special. My reasoning for where it went wrong for England and where people seem to really lose faith was that Scotland game. It wasn't even necessarily the result. It was just the fact that really we were outplayed by a fairly average Scotland side, and I think that's shocked a lot of people. But I think everybody's fairly happy now.
I think we have to get away from this idea of the golden generation, and I'll tell you why. Because if you think about 10 years ago, when you're talking about David Beckham, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, Rio Ferdinand, Sol Campbell, Ashley Cole, Wayne would have been in the squad then. Wayne, were you in the squad?
Yeah,
then?
I was in the squad then. Yeah.
And then you look at those individual players we have. We don't have those individual players now. They were much better individually than the team we have now. So if they were the golden generation, and individually, and I mentioned some players there already in Beckham, Lampard, Gerrard, Scholes, Ferdinand, and Ashley Cole, Rio, John Terry, and they didn't win. Why do we feel now that this generation of the players we actually have are better than them? So why is this the golden generation? We have to stop doing that. This is a good team who, under the right circumstances, can win, but our expectations are unrealistic. And the good thing about this is that we're going to talk about this later on, obviously, but I just love the half of the draw we're in, because if we can beat Germany, we've got a clear path through to the final. So I want to get away from this is the golden generation. Absolutely.
Now, something I want to ask you as well, John, as well. Looking back at 1990, I mean, England didn't make a particularly great start in the group stage. I mean, how do players kind of think about the groups? I mean, are the players worried about the performances like back when you were playing?
Well, once again, you have to look at the nature of the team back then, because don't forget, we had Peter Shilton, Brown, Robson, Gary Lineker. We had experienced players who could handle the negativity. We never made a good start. 86 was the same. But because we had experienced players, the criticism that was coming in our way in the beginning didn't affect us. We were experienced. The problem we have now is that because they're still relatively inexperienced and young, that if you criticize them too much, it can affect them. Because if you look at Germany, you look at Portugal, you look at France, they've got experienced players in international football. You want your players, the age of your players, the age between 27 and 33, the majority of them. And then you have a few 22-year-olds, a couple of 18-year-olds. But we have such a young team that they haven't got that much experience. So if it doesn't go well and you criticize them too much, it can affect them.
Now, you touched there on experience. Wayne, I know you're backing Harry Kane to do a job still for England. Are you still in that camp? You think he can still lead us to glory?
I am. I think it's going to come. I think it has to. Like I said, I think with the knockout stages, I think some of the games are maybe going to be a little bit more open. Not necessarily at the beginning of the games, but I don't think anyone's not going to want to go to penalties. I think England have started quite quick at the start of the games as well. A couple of chances early on in the games. So I'm hoping if we nick a goal early on in those games, I just see us doing really, really well. And like we say about, it is tournament football, and as long as we don't concede, like it doesn't matter how we know. We all want to see pretty football, but we've just got to stay solid as a team and get through those, get through the rounds. I think we've got players that are more than capable to switch it on. I'm not sure if he knows his favourite 11 at the moment, to be honest, especially after some of the performances the other day. So I don't know if he knows who he's going to play attacking-wise. I know who I would play, but it's a difficult decision for him, and he gets under so much flack no matter what team he picks.
Yeah, he can't win either way, right? But yeah, John, what do you make of the starting 11s that you have seen so far? I mean, would you have put the same lineups out?
Well, I would have. I don't think there's much difference between the players. They're all good players. And what we can't do is if one of our good players doesn't play well, say that he shouldn't have played. Because should Jack Grealish play instead of Phil Foden, instead of Mason Mount, instead of Marcus Rashford? The thing is, if they've started, they don't do particularly well. The solution isn't like they shouldn't have played, they should have been somebody else. You have to look at the way we play. Because look at Germany, for example. Gnabry. Gnabry wasn't anywhere near Arsenal's team, but he's playing for Germany because he fits into the system. We have to have a system that suits the players rather than looking for our solution shouldn't be let Jack Grealish play to beat 5 players and score a goal. That's not what England should be doing. We should have a system of play that means whoever plays is going to be successful because they're fitting into the system. Now, experience comes a lot with that. You saw Germany against Hungary. They're going out to the tournament. But because of the experience they have, they didn't panic. They're not even playing well. But they didn't panic knowing that they could come back. That's the fear I have for England. If you're playing well, or even if you're leading 1-0 and we're up, then everything is going well. But if we go behind, I can't see us coming back because everything will be so negative because we haven't got that experience. So I don't worry about the individuals who play because any of the individuals who play are going to be good enough on the day to do what they do. My worry is more to do with the fact that are we going to play with defensive midfield players to protect the back four? Or who's going to play in the back four from a defensive point of view? Are we going to play a 3 or a 4? Because you just can't keep switching from game to game, depending, particularly in a tournament or international football, depending on how you feel who's playing well. We have to develop a way of playing and say, this is what we're going to stick with, and the players have to fit into the system.
I think you touch on an interesting
I totally get that.
Go on, Wayne, yeah.
It's like, for me, it's exactly right. Like, we have players that are capable of playing. It doesn't matter who plays. The only thing with me that I would change would be 2 defensive-minded midfielders like Rice and Phillips. I'd love to see us just 1 defensive midfielder. We've got 4 at the back, 1 defensive midfielder, and then you can fit Mount, Foden, whether it's Grealish or Saka, Amsterdam and Kane into that team. So I just think it's the defensive, how we go about it defensively. And not,
but I
not
think
go
also,
too
I think
defensive.
also that depends. I think that depends who we're playing against. Because if we're playing against a team who's going to have more possession than us, so if we're playing against Belgium and they're going to have more possession than us, I think we need maybe 2 holding midfield players. If we're not, like against Scotland, for example. So I think it really depends on who we're playing against as to how he plays. Because the whole idea of let's just play the 5 attacking players and 1 holding midfield player, then you're playing against Belgium or you're playing against Spain, who are going to keep possession and run through you. Considering our back 4 in the old days when you had Ashley Cole, Rio Ferdinand, Sol Campbell, Gary Neville, and David Seaman in goal, whoever is in goal. That back 4 is a solid back 4, but our defense is now strongest part. So if we think we're just going to have that back 4 defending against Spain or France or Belgium, as I said, the good thing about it is I think we can beat Germany because Germany aren't great at the back. You can see how slow they are. But the further we go down the line, that's why I'm so pleased that we won the league to finish second. Because that other half of the group, whether it's Spain, Portugal, France, Belgium, and Italy, that would have been a hell of a proposal.
I get that. You do have to play against. It depends who you play against. I just feel like we've missed that. Against the teams we've played already, we've missed that chance where we could have just played that one defensive midfielder.
Yeah.
Whether you ask Mount to kind of do a bit of both up and down, I just feel like we've missed that chance and not tried it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, looking on as our kind of expert fan, Rory, I want to bring you in here. Like, what do you see as England's identity? Is that something that is missing in the England team?
I think that's something that people would definitely like to see more of. I think that the lack of pride, perhaps, at least has been levelled with the players in playing. Particularly, it became apparent in that game against Scotland. Scotland seemed to be more tenacious. Scotland seemed to want it more, and ultimately were unlucky not to get the victory. But I do also think there is an identity. I think that Harry Maguire coming back is a huge moment, and I think we are now set up as a team that are incredibly stingy at the back. I think it's only us and Italy that haven't conceded so far this tournament. And I think that is our identity. We are going to be a team that is exceptionally difficult to beat and have the mercurial players further up the pitch that can steal it where necessary.
So yeah,
the fact that we didn't concede don't mean that we're playing with a defensive identity. Scotland could have scored 3 or 4 against us. Scotland don't create many chances, and they created 4 chances against us. Czech Republic could have scored 3 or 4 against us. So if you're talking about Scotland and Czech Republic creating chances, and on another day they could have scored 2 or 3, when you're playing against Belgium or Spain or France or teams like that, they will score. So it's not so much the fact that we haven't scored. The opposition have had good opportunity to score against us, but they haven't. So a defensive identity for me is when you don't give the opposition opportunities to score, not whether they've scored or not. So I still don't feel we're looking secure at the back because Scotland, who don't really attack and create many chances, could have scored 3 or 4 against us.
I mean, who would you start at the back then, John? Mings, I think, has done pretty well, but who would you start at the back line?
I would start John Stones and Harry Maguire at the back, alongside Luke Shaw and Kyle Walker.
And
but if you're going to play 3 at the back, as he
expert.
might, if you're going to play 3 at the back, I would play Kyle Walker as a right side centre back of 3 with John Stones and Maguire, and then I'll play Reece James at left wing back and Luke Shaw at right wing back. Sorry, Luke Shaw at left wing back and Reece James at right wing back.
What do you make of that? I'd like to see defensive expert.
Yeah, I like it. The only thing I would maybe change, or I think Shaw has had a fantastic season, but Saka has as well, and he just seems like he had no fear in the game that he played in, and he just played freely. So I would like him to go in as one of the wing backs if he was to play instead of Shaw, maybe.
And how about
but defensively, if you're playing against a team with a winger who's really, really quick and skillful, and if you're playing against Dumfries, for example, is he going to be defensively good enough for the far post? So that's from an attacking perspective. Talking about,
He's got a hard choice. I couldn't be England manager because it would do my head in with all them choices. but yeah, it all depends who you play against.
I'd be the more cautious manager.
Yeah. All right, so guys, if I had to pin you down to maybe one thing we need to change in order to win the tournament, John, starting with you, what would that be?
Well, first of all, I think we can go to I think if we beat Germany, we go to the final, looking at the way it is. But then, if you look at the other group, and if France go to the final, and you see how strong France are, and then you're looking at Italy, who are also strong, Belgium are also strong. What we have to do is we have to play as well as we can, because all you can ask any team or player to do is maximize their potential. So if England maximize their potential, yes, and they get to the final, and they maximize their potential in the final, But they play against France in the final, who also maximize their potential. Who will win? France will win. So what we have to do, we have to play as well as we can and hope that if we're playing against France or Belgium, that they don't play as well as they can. Because we can't say that if we play as well as we can, we're going to win. Because if France plays as well as they can and Belgium plays as well as they can, they'll both beat us. So, but I think we can get, if we beat Germany, I can see us getting to the final. Then after that, it's a toss of a coin.
I think that's a fair shout. Wayne, anything specifically you want to change, either the tactics or individuals?
I'm not going to go into tactic, defence, attack. I'd probably just say I'd want to keep everyone away from social media. I'd want to keep everyone from reading about what is said about you, because I think it can affect players too much. And like John was talking about experience, and I think it can. So as a manager, I'd want to keep them away from everything, just build on that confidence and get everyone playing with confidence and not worry about what anyone outside that team says. And this is us, and just be free of it all and just forget about what anyone says about you.
And how about for you, Rory, looking in as a fan's perspective?
I think that they just need to be a bit more adventurous. I think my concern is that we've constantly sat back, we've constantly played two defensive midfielders, and I think that perhaps Germany isn't the game to do it, but I think that we should let certain players play in a more expansive way. The likes of Grealish, take the lead off him and let him fly, because I think that he can lead England all the way to the top. So just being a little bit more adventurous and a little less cautious would go a long way, I think.
I think I just wanted to mention one thing as well. Rory, I know you get a lot of flack on social media in regards to your prediction about Scotland. But guys, can we just maybe talk about how Scotland did? Rory, I'll start with you.
Well, yes, sir, I can boogie. They did exactly as you kind of expected them to. It kind of went as you'd expect. I think the class told, didn't it? I thought Luka Modric, I think his goal was sublime. I think he became, on that day, Croatia's youngest and oldest ever goal scorer. And I think that it was a resilient attempt from Scotland, but they won 0-0 at Wembley, and that's as good as it got.
Now, all of us in the first edition of the big stage, we did say that England would win. I just want to pull up the odds now for the tournament outright. So France are the favourites. John, do you think that France are the strongest team in the tournament at the moment from what you've seen?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think if you look at the way Belgium play, for example, they play more attractive football, as does Spain. But when you talk about a balance of a team who are physically strong, and you saw them in the last game where they were just winning 50-50, and you got Kante, Rabiot, Pogba in midfield, and Pogba is playing the way he should be playing. For Man United, he tries to show off and beat flicks and beat players and do stupid things. But for France, he plays correctly. Then when you look at Griezmann up front, how hard he works chasing back, Mbappe with what he has, and Benzema, they've got a balance of working hard as a team. They don't play as free-flowing as Belgium, but you can see they're strong at the back, quick at the pack. Kimpembe, when Pavard comes back in, Varane, they're quick, they're strong, and they can win ugly. I don't think England can win ugly against a top team. Where you saw France against Germany, they can win ugly. Belgium are probably the most attractive team, but defensively, I still think there's a problem. So I think France won't be the most attractive team, as they weren't in the World Cup when Belgium had 65% possession, but they beat them. But I think that they just have the best balance of all the teams.
And how about for you, Rory? Thinking about who is actually going to win, do you think England do have a chance?
I think we certainly do have a chance. I definitely concede that we are least. We are behind France. I think some would say we're behind Germany, behind Belgium, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think that we have an incredibly good group of players, even if I wouldn't go so far as to refer to it as golden again. I do think it's a very good. I do think it's a very good crop of players.
Silver,
and therefore
not gold and silver.
Silver, exactly. Yeah. Or maybe these are gold, and the Rio and John Terry crowd were all were platinum. Who knows? But yeah, I think that this is a very good crop of players that could potentially do some damage. And look, if we get past Germany, the draw's been so kind that who knows what could happen. I think the Dutch lying in wait isn't something that we should be too fearful of. And home advantage in a final, imagine it would be amazing.
And Wayne, do you still share that view that England can go all the way? Football's coming home.
Coming home. Well, I still think it's going to be a France-England final. I said it from the start. We've obviously got the easier side of the draw. but they can't go in too complacent because we all know no game's too easy. But yeah, for me, France are definitely the best team on paper and the way they get results. And I still think it's going to be an England-France final, and
who's
hopefully
gonna
we
win?
can produce on the day. I said England win, so I'm hoping we produce
Here we
on the day.
I'm with you, Wayne.
That'd probably be the only bet I've got
And
right.
they can. Look, England. There are two questions. There are two questions. Can England win the Euros? Yes. Will they win the Euros? I think France will. So when you say, can England win or will England win? Yes, they can. Absolutely. They can get to the final or not, they can. But as to whether they will, I would have to say that if they played France in the final, I'll have to say yes, England 100% can win. But if I had to put my last penny on it, I would bet on France.
Who do France play if they win the next game? Is it Italy or Austria?
I'm not sure how that goes, but you look at the 5 teams in there, and you know, there's Italy, there's Spain, there's France, there's Portugal, and there's Belgium. So the chances are that coming into the semi-finals, it's going to be 2 unbelievable teams.
Yeah, so France would have to meet the winners of Spain against Croatia, and then they'd move on to between Belgium and Italy for the quarters.
So, could be anyone, couldn't it, really?
So that's a pretty tough draw on that side. But obviously, before we get to...
I thought Portugal were on that side as well, no?
Portugal on that side, so Portugal or Belgium.
They could play
Italy
Portugal.
Really tough draw. Now, obviously, before we get too carried away saying England are going to win it, get to the final, we do have a game against Germany coming up. That's what I want to talk about now. Starting off, John, what makes England v Germany such a special fixture?
Well, of course, we don't want to go back to 1944, obviously. But England-Germany is always a special fixture because of that, as is mentioned all the time. But I think from 1966, that's when it really started, when England first won the World Cup in 66. And then, of course, in 1970, we lost to them in the quarterfinals. And then since then, we've come up against them in World Cups in crucial times. 1990, obviously, but then, of course, 1996 in the Euros. We beat them in the World Cup qualifiers, and in World Cups before. So it is always a special fixture. That game is going to be interesting. And when you talk about a team we should actually play, I think that this is a game because you saw them against the last game they played against Hungary. And because they're not particularly mobile at the back, particularly with Hummels. If you play, and of course we want to find a place for Jack Grealish that people are talking about, but I think this game is suited because as much as they're not particularly mobile at the back, they still play a high line. They don't sit back and defend deep. So that's why Hungary gave them problems. And I think that's the way they're going to play against us. I think this game is 100% suited to Marcus Rashford. I would have Sterling and Kane, wide positions, Harry Kane up front, and with those two running off the ball, because Grealish doesn't run off the ball, Foden doesn't run off the ball, I think they will give them a hell of a problem. So as much as you would think that Foden or Grealish is ahead of Rashford, I think in this particular game, because they're going to play a high line and they're not particularly quick at the back, and the fullbacks both push on, the spaces for Rashford and Sterling running without the ball, I think that would be our best chance.
And how about for you, Wayne? What are your memories of England v Germany? You did play against them back in 2008. What's your memories of it?
Of that, to be honest, all my memories are from going out to Germany, to be honest. I know we beat them back in the day and I wasn't born and stuff, but yeah, you just want to beat them so badly. That is all my memory. And I think everyone was pretty negative going into, not negative, but not again. But I feel like this time everyone feels like we can beat them, I feel. So I'm more excited about this game.
And for you, Rory, do you see?
What about if it goes to penalties?
This is what we're going to talk about.
It's not going to penalties because we're going to score more than one. We're going to score more than one goal. That's why.
Yeah. Ashley Cole told us what happens that the Germans don't lose on penalties. Ashley Cole changed all that. He said they do now. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed that we can carry on in that vein. Yeah.
Well, you touch on penalties, of course. 96, thinking back, Southgate missing against Germany. I mean, Rory, do you see this as an opportunity for Southgate to redeem himself?
Oh, that's it. It feels like an opportunity for redemption there, doesn't it? It almost feels scripted. He had the heartbreak in 1996, and now he has the opportunity to exercise those demons and potentially knock Germany out of the Euros at Wembley, leading in England into a quarter-final. It feels so enormous, doesn't it? It's so wonderful if it were to come off. And I truly believe it can. Like, I do try. Look, obviously, I'm a passionate England fan, but I do try and look at it with a little bit of perspective. And I think that there is an opportunity here. I think that England are good enough if we get it right. So fingers crossed we can make it happen.
I mean, my
I can
prediction
just
at the
see,
very
I
start.
can picture it now. I can see
Go
him fist pumping, cheering that we've done him. I can see it. I can see it now.
Like the Stuart Pearce celebration.
There's some
there.
Germans in Munich can see it as well, though, eh?
That's it. Now, I did
Yeah.
actually predict at the very start of the big stage that I would say that Germany are going to get eliminated on penalties. I think that was 9-2 back then. Now you can get England to win on penalties at 9-1 with Bet365. It's also 9-2 to actually go the whole distance and go to penalties. I think, John, I mean, just looking at this squad, do you think they have the bottle for a penalty shootout, or do you think they can handle it?
Well, once again, experience counts for a lot, doesn't it? And you know the Germans with the experience they actually have. And there's less pressure on the Germans than there is on England, which doesn't make sense. Because, if you think that Germany, even if they're equal to England or people feel they're better, there's not this expectation, unrealistically, that Germany should beat everybody and should win. So therefore, when you have less pressure on you, then the easier it is to perform, either in penalties or otherwise. And I feel that we just put so much pressure on our players. And pressure on experienced players, like in 86 or 90 when we had Brian Robson, Peter Shilton, lots of it, Terry Butcher, we can handle that. But I hate the pressure being put on these young players, which is unrealistic. That's why with Sacco, let him go out there and play with freedom and expression. And if he doesn't play well, don't say he's no good. If he plays well, don't say he's the best in the world. Allow them to develop. And I'll tell you, the biggest telltale sign for me in that is Jadon Sancho and Jude Bellingham. We're saying how great they are and how much we love them. Why did they have to go to Germany to play? Because in England, they wouldn't be given an opportunity. So those two young boys went to Dortmund, play with no pressure, express yourself, and now we're taking the credit for having them when we didn't develop them. They went to Germany because here, we put too much pressure on our young players. In Germany, they don't. So that is why when it comes to penalties and winning matches, I think the Germans have got an advantage because there's less pressure on them by their fans, by the public, by everybody to be successful.
That's actually a good point. You bring up Sancho there. He's not played a lot in the first games. I mean, would you start him, John?
No, I wouldn't, because ahead of who? The problem is we have so many Sanchos and Sterlings and Rashfords and Fodens and Grealishes. You can't, because you say start Sancho, but you want to start Grealish and you want to start Sterling and you want to start Foden. Because you can't play so many attacking midfield players who defensively aren't going to give you that much. So the balance it's important. So I wouldn't start Sancho ahead of Foden, Grealish, Sterling, or Rashford. Particularly in a big game like this. Maybe you could have played him in one of the early games against Scotland, but in a game like this, I think you need the tried and tested.
Now, Wayne, I want to bring up, hopefully it's not too painful, but back to Euro 2004, where you weren't involved. But, I mean, obviously you're on the pitch, right, against Portugal when we lost in that penalty shootout. I just want to get a little insight. What goes on amongst the players when you have a penalty shootout? I mean, what's being said? Like, how much pressure do you think the players will feel?
There's so much pressure. I've spoke about this, the young players that we have, but I said there's something about them. There's a confidence, there's a swag about them. But there is so much pressure on your shoulders. You can't even describe it. Like, I felt for the players that missed a penalty. I sometimes feel for the player of the opposite team because they're kind of I can imagine straight away they're thinking everyone's going to hate me. I'm going to get slated. There is so much pressure, and I'm telling you now, when they step up to take that penalty, that goal will shrivel. It will shrivel. That goalkeeper is going to look massive. You've really got to have, like John said, you've either got to have that experience or you've just got to have that mentality up here that I am the best and I'm sticking this in the back of the net. There is a lot of pressure.
I'll tell you why experience counts for a lot. I'll tell you why experience counts a lot in penalty shootouts. Because 1990 penalty shootout when Peter Beardsley went up to take his penalty, and we love Bobby Robson. And we had a lot of experienced players, and Bobby was just very enthusiastic, and he used to, motivate everybody. He used to get people's names wrong. He used to pick the wrong team. He was a bit like that. But everybody wanted to play for him because he had experienced players, and you understood him. Then you performed. So just before the penalty, Peter Beardsley was going up to take his penalty. Bobby Robson came over to him to give him these words of wisdom. Now imagine he said this to a young player, and Bobby Robson didn't mean it in this way. But because we know Bobby, we know he doesn't mean it in this way. However, how are you going to perform? He walked over to Peter and he whispered in Peter's ear. Now, you'd expect the manager to say, listen, you've done really well. Don't worry about it. Just relax. You go and take it because, we've done so well to get to this point. You would actually go and score. He walked over to Peter Beardsley and he whispered in his ear and he said, Peter, 50 million at home watching us. Don't let us down. Now, imagine saying that. Right. Now, Bobby, if you didn't know Bobby Robson, you would think what a stupid thing to say to put pressure on you. But because Bobby doesn't really mean it in that way, Peter with his experience when he scored. But imagine saying that to a young 18-year-old player, 50 million at home watching, don't let us down.
Mate, that would not happen now. There's no chance that happens now.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But Rory, what do you make of the penalty shootout from a fan's perspective? I mean, is it like the drama of it? How good is it really?
Well, I mean, they're wonderful if you win, aren't they? Like, one of the best nights of my life was in Munich when Chelsea won the European Cup in 2012. But equally, the pain of Moscow is still very prevalent in my life. So there are wonderful things if you win. But I think that England need to not think on those lines. I mean, obviously, Wayne and John will have far more insight here than me. But do you think that you practice them, or do you go into the game hoping that you don't need them? Or do you go into the game expecting that you can get the job done in 90 minutes?
Both. You have to practice penalties.
Yeah.
But you can't replicate a penalty.
The conditioning is so specific, isn't it? Yeah.
I suppose the good thing about it is it's not 100,000 people watching or 90,000 people putting on that pressure. The fact is the stadium's not going to be full, so that will alleviate the pressure slightly, and that would actually, I think, help England. But yes, you can practice your technique, and practicing your technique of what to do with the penalties is paramount, very important. But what you can't practice is what happens upstairs when you know that if I miss this, we're actually going out.
You want to have penalty
minutes, right?
You want to have penalty takers that have had experience taking penalties in a penalty shootout as well. Because you've got to have that. Like I've only took one in my career and I missed. So like I wouldn't be.
Was that a penalty shootout or a penalty?
Penalty shootout for Chelsea. I wouldn't be sticking my hand out.
Open play.
No, that's the only.
Where was it, Wayne?
It was a cup game. I don't remember it because who wants to remember it? It was one of the. It was one of the small cups anyway. It wasn't one of the big ones. But yeah, like you want people that have had experience and are really confident, and the manager's got to have. He has to speak with the players to see who is actually confident about taking a penalty.
Now, John, you raise a good point there with Wembley.
Because what can happen is that we talk about your penalty takers before the game. Who's going to take a penalty? Then during the game, you have a bad game, and at the end of the game, you may not be confident. You've missed an open goal to win it, and then are you going to take a penalty to meet? So therefore, as much as you have your penalty takers who say, I'll take one, come the end of the game, that may actually change. So a player may feel confident he's played well, he didn't want to take one, and now he will. Or a player who would then say, I wanted to take one before, but I'm not confident now. So ultimately, it's a bit of a lottery.
I think for me, after playing 120 minutes of football as well, I'll be too knackered to take one, but I'm not sure how big a factor that would be. But John, you touched on the fact that we're playing at Wembley, obviously, but there's not going to be a full house. I mean, how much impact has that had on the tournament? The fact there's not been so many fans in attendance, or there's been some, but what are your feelings on that?
I think it's been. Listen, all the games, in my opinion, have been played at a pace and an intensity as if they were playing in front of full houses. The tackles, and it's been great because the referee's been allowing tackles, and I love that. Although I've been going, that's a foul in modern day. But the games have been good. The players have been getting stuck in. There's not been many red cards. There's been lots of aggression. So I think the games have been played as if it was a full house. So I've loved it. I don't think it's impacted on it at all.
I think one of the special moments that we've seen in the tournament has been Denmark. Of course, they're coming up against the other home nation that did qualify, Wales. John, what was your thoughts on how Denmark came back after the adversity with Christian Eriksen? They came back to beat Russia. How impressed were you by them?
Very impressed. Very impressed because, of course, they did have... But in many respects, that can actually galvanize them, can bring them together. A bit like when they won the Euros in 92, when they didn't qualify, and then all of a sudden, because whoever got kicked out, they went and they won it. That can actually galvanize and pull them together. As to whether they have that quality all the way through to actually go and win it, I'm not sure. As much we didn't think that in 2002, whenever they won it either. 1992, sorry. So they've done really well to get to this point. And, of course, on a one-off, anything can happen. And they work hard. If you look at the players up front, Poulsen, Damsgaard, they all work hard for each other, work hard as a team. So, yeah, I think they could spring a few surprises.
On the flip side, though, Wayne, your bold prediction is that England and Wales do qualify from this round. What gives Wales the edge against Denmark, in your view?
Look, I think it's a 50-50 game. I've gone for Wales. I think Ramsey's been great. And the way he's combined the runs he makes and when Bale's picking him out. And I've always touched on their team spirit that they seem to have in that Welsh group. They work so hard for each other. I thought they defended well. And And I think it's something I look and I thought, I wish England had a little bit of that. Maybe they haven't been put under as much pressure, but the fight they seemed to show, I thought was brilliant. And I just think if them two perform, Bale and Ramsey, I think they could go and do it.
Now, Rory, I know you like the look of Gareth Bale as well. I mean, yeah, how's this tournament been for you in general? And how do you think he'll perform against Denmark?
I think Gareth Bale is a tremendous footballer. And I think that actually the time that he had at Tottenham last season is rather harshly viewed. I think he had a fairly good season. Tottenham were abysmal and he was one of their better players. I think he was held responsible for their poor season, which is fairly unjust. But when you put him in a Welsh shirt, he becomes a very different player, doesn't he? He looks hungry, looks determined, didn't let that penalty miss affect him. I think he's great. And I can see him doing nearly enough to get them to beat Denmark, but I do think Denmark will be too strong.
Yes, of course, they have the 13-2 bold prediction there for Bale to score and then Denmark to progress. It's an interesting one. Now we're going to move on to the standout players of the tournament. John, just on an individual point of view, which players have stood out for you so far?
Interestingly, and not for the reason you might think, Griezmann has stood out a lot for me, not because he's scoring goals or attacking well, but because of the work he's put in. You know, when you talk about all the players they have, I know that Didier Deschamps has him as probably their most important player. Not because he may score, like look at Mbappe and Benzema and Pogba, but he works so hard for the team. And I love players who do that. He's an attacking player, he's a flair player, he's a skillful player, but he's selfless. You know, he plays for the team. He's subservient to the team ethic, and he understands how to play in that particular team. So not for the reasons you would think, because you would think that obviously, you know, scoring goals and playing well, that's what the star player does. But for me, for what Griezmann as an example, who is a really skillful player, who's a flair player, but who really works hard for the team first and foremostly, I think that he stood out.
I think he put in some crunch.
Obviously, Ronaldo with the goals he scored, and Ronaldo as a talisman, because he hasn't really played well in terms of having lots of touches and showing lots of skill. But when someone to rely on in either his penalties that he scored or the goals he scored, he's obviously up there as well.
I mean, my bold prediction was that Ronaldo wouldn't score at all in the tournament, so that was completely wrong. But Wayne, I wanted to bring you in. Obviously, with England against Germany, you've got potentially Kai Havertz against Mason Mount. I mean, how is it for you as like playing on the international stage, on the big stage, when you come up against a player that you play with at club level? I mean, how does that dynamic work?
Well, most of the time I was sat on the bench. Do you know what it is? I think you do want to get one over on them. You do really want to. And look, I think you know each other inside out as well. You can see it when the lads played against Scotland and Billy Gilmore. You're obviously friends, but you switch off and you want to get one over on them, 100%. And for me, I don't know what's going to go on with Mason. I don't know where he's, what's going on with training and the whole saga. But for me, he has to be in the team because I just think he's one of them players that you can tell him to do it. I feel like you can tell him to do a job and he will do it. He will do it no matter what you want him to do. I think he could play anywhere in that midfield. You know, if we were going to, if Phillips didn't play and you wanted him to kind of do a Phillips role and help out at the back, I think he could do that. I think he could do whatever you want him to do.
Now, one player
I agree, and I think that is why when you talk about a midfield three, if you're going to play 4-3-3, regardless of whether there's Grealish, who could be a better attacking player, more skillful than him, whereas you're going to need, if you have two midfield players and you want a third midfield player to come back and defend, I'd always have, if you're going to have Rice and Phillips or whoever else, the third midfield player for me would be Mason Mount. Because not only will he get forward, but he'll also get back into defensive positions and defend well against Belgium and teams like that who may have a lot of possession. As to whether he's going to play, because obviously with the COVID situation, and is he going to be, has he trained? Is he going to be able to even train before the game? I don't know. But I would have him in.
And the last thing Mason's going to want as well is going back there, having been beat by Germany and Timo and Havertz turning up at the training ground. You're just not going to want it.
No, but wait, let me tell you something. I've played with Germans before. What's worse than that is England beating Germany. Because I'll tell you, English players taking the mickey out of German players is a bit different. The German players don't make fun of, they'll go, oh yeah, unlucky, and yeah, we beat you. But English players will never let them live it down. You know that.
Now, Rory, one player that you brought up as well for the young player of the tournament was Isak for Sweden. Now, he's been really impressive. He's been backed in from 33-1 into 12-1 for young player of the tournament. What have you made of him and Sweden overall?
Yeah, I think they've been brilliant. I think that he has been the jewel in the crown. I think a lot of people are talking about certain youngsters who were going to shine. I mean, Locatelli's also been one to mention, deserves an honourable mention here. But I think generally speaking, Isaac has been outstanding, and Sweden have been good. It could result actually in England Sweden, couldn't it? That's on the horizon for us. And I thought the way they played in that game against Poland to come back in the way that they did, winning 3-2 in the last minute, the drama involved there, it's a special moment for them. And I think they are a very good side. But equally, I don't think that England should be too fearful. We obviously beat them in 2018, didn't we? And I think that if we end up playing Sweden on the route to, we've been playing Sweden in the last 8. That's a dream. That's a dream draw for us. So
Absolutely.
although they've been good and although Isaac's been great, this is ideal opposition from an England perspective.
Now, one other player I want to highlight in the player of the tournament betting is actually Simon Kjær for Denmark. He's actually come in from odds of over 700 to 1 into 20 to 1. John, obviously what's happened on and off the pitch, I mean, would he be a worthy winner of player of the tournament or just human of the tournament?
Well, I think you should ask Wayne that because, I don't think defenders should be winning players of tournaments. I'm only joking because Virgil was player of the year and Virgil van Dijk. Look, I don't know. Listen, he's been fantastic. He has been fantastic. However, when you talk about player of the tournament, it's really going to be a creative midfield player or a striker, unless there's been a standout defender who's been far and away better than everybody else. And he has been good, but I don't think you look at him and say he's been necessarily better than, I don't know, Varane or even, John Stones or anybody else. So I don't think he can be player of the tournament, but I think he's very important to his team.
It could just potentially be a good PR exercise, right, for UEFA to credit his leadership and things like that. But moving on, I want to highlight some other fixtures in the rest of the round. So basically, we touched on Portugal, Ronaldo being top goal scorer. John, do you think Portugal are strong enough to win against France and move on? Sorry, against Belgium.
Belgium.
I think they could actually beat Belgium because if you look at Belgium, they're such an attractive team going forward and they've got so much flair. But I think at the back they're fairly immobile. They're not particularly quick, and they play a high line as well. So they give you chances. It's just a question as to whether you're going to get enough of the ball against Belgium and you can keep them out, because what they have going forward is incredible, and in midfield and stuff like that. So I think you can get at them. So I think that Portugal can cause them problems, and Portugal are okay at the back. So I think that's not a foregone conclusion with Ronaldo in the form that he's in, and also you're talking about they've got Jota, they've also got Silva, they've got some good players. Fernandez if he plays, so I think they could cause Belgium problems.
And Wayne, how about on the England side of the draw? Obviously, you've got Netherlands there as well. Do you think they'll cruise through?
I think so. I think they will. Although I wouldn't be too worried about them if England got them. To be honest, I think they've definitely proved me wrong because they've gone about and absolutely smashed it in the group stages. But I fancy them to go through quite easily. To be honest.
I also want to touch on Spain. We talked about them in the opening couple of games. They were a bit disappointing. But obviously, they came back with a 5-0 win to finish off the group. Rory, what have you made of Spain? I mean, yeah, it must be a nightmare supporting them, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, they're brilliant, but I think we also have to caveat it by saying that Slovakia just weren't at the races, were they? I thought what was impressive, but also slightly worrying from a Spain perspective, is the fact that they scored 5 goals, but their goal scorer, Alvaro Morata, his only contribution to the goals was missing a penalty. So I actually think there's a ceiling with how far you can go in a tournament like this when you're relying on a player like Alvaro Morata. I'm speaking from experience here, by the way. I'm a man who has placed a lot of love and trust in Alvaro Morata and have been cruelly burnt. So I think that Spain, they were great. Slovakia weren't particularly good, but the worry for them is Alvaro Morata.
I think that's why I've got it down as my bold prediction, actually, for Croatia to beat Spain in 90 minutes. I think they showed enough class against Scotland. Obviously, that goal from Luka Modric as well was just incredible. So I'm going to go for Croatia to win. I just want to get
I had them as my flop as well, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But John, I just want to hand over to you just to quickly round off maybe the last. Do you expect any surprises in the round of 16, or do you think it's all going to be pretty much smooth sailing?
No, because I don't think there'll be any surprises because the Euros is probably harder than the World Cup to win. Because once you go through to the last 16 as we are now in the Euros, they're good teams. You talk about the teams who haven't qualified. The teams who have gone through, they're very, very good teams. So it won't be much of a surprise if Wales beat Denmark or any of the games, because they're all difficult ones. So even if there are upsets in terms from the odds and from the bookies' point of view, I don't think there can be any surprises at all, because in the last 16, these are top quality teams, all of them.
Absolutely. Do you share that view, Wayne, as well? Do you think there'll be any upsets or not?
Yeah, I went through the games and I put a lot of 50-50s down. It was, I couldn't call them. I can't call Belgium, Portugal. Like I said, I've gone for Wales, but it could be a 50-50 game. Ukraine, Sweden. There's a lot of 50-50 games. I obviously fancy France and Italy and England to obviously go through. But they are close games, and it's tournament football. Anything can happen. It's never going to be straightforward.
Now, Rory, we just brought up your bold prediction as well for the whole round. No clean sheets at all. Every team to score a goal. Can you just explain that for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of off the back of the wonderful football day that we had yesterday. Just goals galore, wasn't it? And it was wonderful to see. I think there are only two teams. I think England and Italy are the only two teams that haven't conceded goals yet. And as we said, with England, there's a considerable amount of luck involved in that. So teams are conceding. Teams are looking like they're desperate to score goals. The goals are flowing in yesterday. I think that we will see that continue into the next round. I think it will be great.
And over 250.
Italy haven't conceded for how many games?
Yes, ages, isn't it?
It's a lot, yeah.
Ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah.
But that wraps up for our time with Wayne and John. So, lads, pleasure to speak to you. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. Hopefully we'll see you again very soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
All the best, Wayne. Take care.
See ya. Take care, John.
Cheers.
Bye.
And now we're going to move on to Rory's rant. So once again, our special guest, Rory Jennings, has got something to get off his chest, and it's the topic of England's opponent in the next round. Rory, the floor is yours.
Yes, I would like to discuss Germany. I think that people are portraying them as being the Germany of old. People are portraying them as being the wonderful sides that we've seen in the past, and I don't think they're that. Of course, they're a good team. Of course, they have match winners, and of course, they're going to be stiff opposition for England. But they are beatable. They are a team who have vulnerability. We've seen that in the group. We've seen the way that they've been leaky at the back in the group. We've seen the way that they've had to fight tooth and nail in order to just get a point off Hungary at home. They are a team that are certainly beatable. And I think if England go into this game truly believing and committing to the thought of victory, it can be done. If you look at certain individuals, maybe we pick Antonio Rudiger, for example, had a fantastic last 6 months with Chelsea, but during his time at Chelsea, I have seen him looking fairly precarious at times and actually not even in the first team at Chelsea. He is a player who can play on his day brilliantly, but does have a mistake in him and does have vulnerabilities. England need to exploit that. And I think that we need to now stop looking at this Germany team as if they are the Germany teams of a bygone era. This is a team that we can get at, and England, I would say, player for player, are better.
Well, it's a bold prediction as well. I think England are the slight favourites to beat Germany. So, let's hope so. Let's hope they go forward. It'll give us more to discuss on the next edition of the big stage. But Rory, that's it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time on the show.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. And now we're going to move on to the community section where we're going to round up what's going on bettingexpert.com. So over on Betting Expert, we have been hosting a tipster competition where basically you can post your own predictions and potentially win cash prizes throughout the tournament. This is the current standings. Once again, it's our tipster Debitante who is leading the way, but very, very close in second place is Luda Kvota, if I can say that properly. So only a couple of units there splitting the difference between the top two. So be sure to check out bettingexpert.com and see in what tips they are posting up next. I also want to feature 5 of the most profitable tips from the group stage. So these are tips that maybe you might have missed out on from the website, but you probably should have got on because they all generated reams of profit. So shout out to these tipsters, especially JTF, who did correctly predict that Hungary and France would be level at, Hungary will be in front at halftime, and then it will be a draw after 90 minutes. That brought him in 33 units of profit on a single unit staked. So very good tip there. And I think JTF is actually 4th in the rankings currently, so is showing some really good fight and the potential for winning more cash prizes. As I say, if you want to post your own predictions and enter in that competition and get your username up on Betting Expert on the next edition of the big stage as well, then head on over to the website. But for now, if you are going to place a bet and follow our experts' advice, as always, please do gamble responsibly.